basically it ended up with about half a liter of this methylated spirit alcohol exploding in my hand. I was half naked. The whole inside of the boat just is on fire. It was really painful.
What's up, nomads? Welcome to your new favorite travel podcast, Two Beers Till Takeoff, the podcast that delivers expert knowledge, the information you won't get in your guidebooks, and a story that's guaranteed to make you say, what the fuck, or your money back.
B, you know our episodes are free, right?
Hello and welcome to Two Beers Till Takeoff. My name is Phil and I'm here with my guest, Max Campbell. Max Campbell is from Cornwall, UK. And at 21, he decided to sail across the Atlantic Ocean alone from the UK to the Caribbean and back again. At 21, since then, he has rebuilt a bigger boat, Elixir, aka the Floating Hostel, who is a Swan 37 and is currently circumnavigating the globe with a group of friends. Elixir is currently in Mexico and Max is back home in the UK visiting family before crossing the Pacific this winter. You can follow along his journey on his wildly popular TikTok and Instagram accounts, un.tide. Welcome to the show, Max.
Thank you very much. I should just say that she's called Elixir, like the elixir of life.
Yeah. Oh no. Did I? It's maybe the Canadian accent coming out.
Oh,
Elixir.
Oh, maybe. I thought you said Alexa.
No. I knew that you weren't a big Amazon fan.
All right, that's good. That's good, man. That mistake.
How did you come up with the name?
You don't choose the name. Boats are built like so. Elixir, she was built in 1970, and she was given a name, and then well, I mean, sailors are superstitious people, and generally it's considered bad luck to change the name of a boat.
Okay.
So I've never. That was her name, when I bought her. It's the same with the boat I had before, Flying Cloud. She was called Flying Cloud, and like that's her name. And yeah, I wouldn't feel great about changing a name. So that was just the name she's always had, and I think it's a great name. I'm really happy with it. It's Elixir of Life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, I guess that's if you're looking to get into sailing, which is, something that we're looking to promote today, is to maybe look at the boat's name before buying, right? If you're like, I'm not crazy about that one. Maybe look elsewhere.
It can swing it. It can swing it for a lot of people. I think if you buy a boat and you're not 100% sure about the name, then I mean that's pretty big. Like my friend, for example, he lives in Bermuda, and he has just bought a boat. It was a hurricane damaged yacht. It was written off, and he paid. It was really cheap. It's 40 feet, so it's a proper like sail around the world boat, and paid something like $8,000 for it.
Oh wow!
And, that's like that can be a house. You can comfortably live on that. You can comfortably sail anywhere in the world. Obviously, it needs a bit of TLC because it was beaten up a bit in a storm. Anyway, pretty much everything is perfect apart from the name. So it's called Blue Stocking, which I mean, it's not so bad, but like he's not like over the moon about it, But I think instead of changing the name, he's just gonna split it and rename the boat Blue.
Okay, that's good. I mean, Blue Stocking.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, like you're not completely changing. It's better to have Blue or Blue Stocking than like like Blue Waffle.
Yeah.
But anyways, moving on. So I want to know how you got into sailing, because man, you were 21 when you first did your big trip across the Atlantic Ocean. How do you, that couldn't have been your first trip? Like you had to. Your parents sailors? How did you get into
it? So yeah, I grew up with my mum and my stepdad, and he's a boat builder. Okay, so nice. He knows how to sail, but like the main the main way that he helped me is he basically taught me how to sail, but he taught me a lot about how to maintain a boat and like pretty much how to look after one. So from like a young age, I was like sweeping up sawdust in a boatyard, and he had this little dinghy that I used to sail around in Bristol Harbour. I'm from Bristol originally, and nice. And I learned how to all of the basics when I was really young, and I straight away I was really passionate about it from a super young age, and then I sailed dinghies like competitively. I was racing, and it was always something I was really into. But my stepdad gets really bad seasickness, so we never went really that far. We did a lot of sailing around where I'm from, but I didn't know anything about sailing across an ocean, for example, which is totally different to sailing a dinghy around, like, you know, within a few miles of shore. And then when I was 18, I bought this boat, Flying Cloud. She's 22 feet long, and she cost £500. And I knew all of the, really cheap. And I knew all of the essentials of how to sail her around. Like I could sail her, but I had no idea how to take her further afield, you know, across the English Channel to France. I didn't really have any like navigational knowledge or anything.
Just throw it on the Google Maps and hope to make it, or
yeah, pretty much. I mean, we had a paper chart, and so then when I finished uni, I was 20. Me and my best mate, we just packed up. We basically just packed up all we could inside this 22-foot boat, and 22 feet is small, and then left for France across the English Channel with no real plan of ever coming back again. It was kind of funny. We're like, right, we're just going to go sailing and see what happens.
We're going to be French. We're going to be French guys now.
Yeah, pretty much. And you know, like straight away, we were crossing the English Channel. It's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Like there's a lot of traffic coming down in between the UK and France. So we had to figure out like, how do you navigate through a shipping channel? How do you sleep? Like, because we were sailing overnight, it's like, how do you continue to sail throughout the night? How do you like tie up in a marina? How do you use the anchor? All of these things were things that I hadn't really properly done before. So I was sort of like figuring out how to, you know, like how to travel on a sailing boat. And yeah, we had a great time though, sailing down through France, and it was August, so everyone's on holiday and partying. Oh, nice. And then we got to Spain and Portugal, and then in Portugal, Harry left because his girlfriend was doing a ski season in the Alps, so he decided to go out with her, and then I carried on by myself, and that's basically how it all kind of started. And then I ended up doing the whole loop of the Atlantic and coming back to the UK. So yeah, it was like
when your friend left and you were by yourself. Was that scary for you? Was that like a holy shit? Like I need to be self-reliant right now. Like it's only me.
Well, it was a funny one because I wasn't mentally prepared for that solo travel experience, you know? Like I feel like if you were to visit another country by yourself, backpacking, you would be prepared to be by yourself, whereas I was just suddenly alone. And not only was I traveling alone, I was sailing alone. So I had a lot to learn there as well. I had to learn how to sail the boat by myself.
Yeah.
But honestly, it all worked out really well. Like, he's my best friend and we're still best mates. So I knew that that's what he wanted to do. And it was all good in the end. It was all good.
Nothing like testing your friendship, right? Together in a boat, you know, nobody else.
Yeah. But yeah, it was all good. It was all good. We got along really well. No arguments or anything.
Oh, that's good. Then you know it's your real good buddy. So just to put it in perspective, how long does a journey across? So I know you did, you know, from England down to France, and maybe just giving the distances and the amount of time that it takes to sail from, you know, that distance, or from the UK all the way to the Caribbean. How long does just to give it into perspective for people?
Okay, so to get from the UK to France is not very far. It's about 24 hours to get all the way down through. I mean, and then it's just how often do you want to sail? Because you can do it in a day sails, like small trips all the way down to the south of Spain to like Gibraltar, or I went to the south of Portugal, the Algarve, and then from there to the Canary Islands is the next big leg, and that's a week of sailing non-stop.
Wow.
And then from the Canary Islands to Cape Verde, which is the next group of islands further south off the coast of Senegal, is, I think it's like 9 or 10 days. And then from Cape Verde across the Atlantic is more or less 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty gnarly.
So it's like 3 weeks of just, solitude, sailing, reading books and catching fish.
Did you, so yeah, maybe talk to us a little bit about, being by yourself, the solitude, like to prepare for that. Did you like watch movies like Castaway? Did you make yourself your own little Wilson?
So it's a really interesting experience, and I think anyone can have this feeling. You just have to spend a long period of time away from society and surrounded by nature. And the thing that I found really profound about it is I feel like in day-to-day life you always have things that are stressful, and that might come from money or work or cars or jobs or relationships or whatever, but there's always subtle mental pressures that you have, and like a baseline level of stress, I guess. But when you're sailing, life becomes quite straightforward and uncomplicated, because all you have to focus on is the environmental conditions around you and sailing the boat, and suddenly things like money and phones just cease to exist because you have no function for them. So I think it brings about this really nice simplicity. Like life becomes very uncomplicated when you're dragging that out for weeks and weeks on end. You can focus on like catching fish, reading books, cooking, and sailing. And I feel like it brings out this sort of raw, authentic human nature that's been suppressed somewhat by living within, like
the 21st century.
Yeah,
cities and phones, and just getting back to the way things used to be. Yeah,
exactly. And I found that really addictive. I found it really euphoric. And as soon as I discovered that, back when I was 21, I knew straight away that I wanted to pursue this activity for as long as I could, because it was, I felt addicted to that feeling, that simplicity and of spending weeks sailing. It's really cool.
And is it more the sailing portion, or do you actually prefer the solo?
No, I think it's definitely the sailing, because since then I've done the Atlantic crossing with friends, and I actually really enjoy doing it with other people as well, because something that I realized when I was doing all this stuff by myself was that it was amazing, because I was experiencing all these things, but I had no one to share it with. And after this one solo trip, I came back to the UK, and I knew that I could do it by myself, and I'd had the experience of being by myself, but I had this profound thought that I wanted to share it with as many people as possible. So I feel like the days of doing it by myself are probably over now, but I'm very, very glad that I did it.
Yeah, it's good. It's almost like a test. You can do it because you went through it and you survived.
Yeah, exactly.
So another thing that I'm interested to find out is the amount of preparation required for a long trip like that, in terms of maybe the weather, the looking at food, water. Like how do you prepare?
Well, in terms of weather, the routes that we're following are sailing routes that have been well established for hundreds of years. So we're following the trade winds, and we're staying away from hurricane season.
Yeah.
It's as long as you do everything at the right time of year, I mean, touch wood, you won't run into any weather. It's when you start to stray outside of the sailing seasons when things can start to get difficult. So the trip that I've planned and everything we've done so far has been sailing outside of the hurricane season in pretty fair weather, and weather-wise it's fine as long as the boat is set up to handle like when the weather does get bad, if that does happen, which is obviously really important. But I mean, I read a lot of books beforehand. I read pretty much every sailing book about from Joshua Slocum, who was the first person to sail around the world, to Ellen MacArthur. She's English. She set the round the world speed record like 10 years ago. So it's like stuff from these old school people doing really pioneering voyages to more modern sailors at like the peak of the sport, like tearing around the world in the Southern Ocean, and just reading all these accounts, like reading about how they set up their boat, things that are important, things that go wrong, and like meeting other sailors as well. As soon as you leave, you're just surrounded by other people doing a similar sort of thing. So like every time you meet someone, you can have a look at their boat and see how they've got things set up, talk about lessons that you've learned, and I mean, I was really naive when I left Falmouth for the first time, and I had like a few like experiences that made me realize they were huge learning curves.
Like this shit is real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you maybe talk about some of those things that you learned along the way that you didn't expect?
So I guess the first thing that's really important is the importance of having an autopilot that can steer your boat for you, because if you're sailing for 3 weeks, you don't want to be sat there driving the whole time. So that's something that I think is really important, right? You have to be able to set the boat up to sail itself, so you can do other things like cook and sleep and fix things and just generally like look after yourself. So that was like the first big lesson that I learned when I was by myself. And I actually built a wind vane autopilot system, which is really common on boats, like on boats that cross oceans. You have an autopilot that uses the wind to steer your boat essentially. And yeah, learning about that was really important. How to deal with the boat in like weather and waves, making sure everything's dry, because if you have waves breaking over the boat and then that's leaking inside, getting all your stuff wet, it's just like the most miserable thing ever. Did you encounter any big storms on your journey? I know you said that you tried to avoid the hurricanes, but I mean, weather changes, right? Yeah, I mean, we did actually sail through a tropical depression, which then developed into a hurricane like 2 or 3 days afterwards. So we were actually sailing on the edge of hurricane season, and we got really close. We were pretty lucky. It was off the coast of Mexico, Chiapas, on the Pacific side of Central America.
Yeah.
And before, it was a 5-day sail, and we saw the storm before we left. It was just forming, and I made the decision to leave anyway, because I felt like it was early enough for it not to build up like significant power, but it would still be really windy, but it was like coming in the right direction, so it was just going to be behind us, blowing us where we wanted, in the direction that we wanted to go in. And it was fine, like it got to about 40-45 knots, which is what we expected. That's sort of like the stage where you want to have almost no sail up. We had like a tiny little bit of sail up, and we were still doing like going as fast as the boat can go. But the thing that was really scary was the lightning, having rays of lightning striking the water all around the boat. Because that's something which is pretty much every sailor's nightmare, is having lightning strike the mast. You've got this big metal stick sticking up into the sky, and yeah, as soon as you get hit, the whole electrical system's fried. You can't start the engine, you can't use any of the nav equipment, so it's like a big deal, and that coupled with the wind, the rain, the waves, it's just a really, really tiring and scary experience. But yeah, there's been a few. There was one off the Sahara Desert, like when we were coming down to the Canary Islands, and you have this phenomenon. It's called a kalima. Basically, it's when the wind is from the east, whips all the sand and dust off the desert and blows it out into the sea. And because it's such a I guess it's unobstructed land, not really any topography. You can just get crazy easterly winds that blow off the Sahara, and we just got caught out by one, and the wind was 45, 50 knots. But what made it really scary is all of this thick dust had blown off the desert, so everything was orange. The visibility was just terrible. All the ropes and the sails were covered in sand. There were even dragonflies, like all these desert creatures that had been like blown off with the gale.
Oh,
so
shit.
we had all these insects clinging to the mast and weird desert creatures. Yeah, you can still get caught out, but luckily Elixir, she's a solid boat, and
Tough girl.
she's tough.
That's crazy, man. That would be, I guess, for me, being someone who's never sailed, that would be probably my biggest fear, like storms, just because I don't know, there's just, movies about them. You only hear them in the news, like, oh, there's a hurricane and somebody got stuck in the hurricane. But for you, you said you've read a lot about sailing and you've done a lot of sailing. So putting it for you, I think it really puts it into perspective. Some of the early explorers, like, Christopher Columbus and stuff like that, that must just blow your mind, being removed by, I don't know, 300 years and still doing the same type of journey that you did.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm more inspired by the, like the self-funded adventurers, like like Joshua Slocum, the first guy to sail around the world. Robin Knox Johnson, who was an English guy, the first guy to sail non-stop, single-handed around the world. These kind of sailors are the guys and girls that I definitely get inspired by, and reading their books. It's just really cool. It's really cool to see what they've done. And I mean, there's still people out there. Like, I met this guy Trevor, an Australian guy, and he's I'm pretty sure he's the only person ever to spend a winter unassisted in both the Arctic and Antarctica. So basically what he does is he sails his boat to Antarctica, finds a bay and ties up in this bay, and then basically just lets the snow and ice like kind of freeze him in, and he builds an igloo around his boat and then just kind of exists for the winter by himself, so he's spending like a year alone in Antarctica. He did the same in the Arctic Circle, and then we met him in the Caribbean, and he's just the most modest guy telling us these crazy stories about being alone in Antarctica, and I'm just like, you need to like write a book or make a video or something, because this is some really inspiring stuff, and like people need to hear this. And I just meeting people like that really it's really cool. It's incredible what some people have done. Like honestly, what I did, like sailing across the Atlantic, is not a big deal at all. Like, so many people have done that. It's like a really easy passage.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal to me, Max. I think that's fucking crazy.
I mean, there's people doing so much more impressive stuff all over the world, and yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that sailing has given me the opportunity to meet these people as well.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Listen, man, you're very humble, but don't minimize what you did, because that's still not something, it may be common in your circles, but in my circles it isn't. So congrats on that. That's awesome.
Cheers.
So for people who are, maybe listening to this and they're like, hey, sailing sounds cool. Max is really, inspiring me. I want to get into this. What are some of the maybe tips you'd give to people to get into sailing? Yeah,
so there's a few ways that you can do it. I mean, for someone who has zero experience, I would say learn how to sail a dinghy first. It's what I did. And once you can handle a dinghy, you can pretty much handle any boat. So it's like a really good place to start. And I mean, you can do that various ways. You can, if you live near a sailing club, you can just sign up to the sailing club and learn there. You can also just buy one and try it out for yourself. I feel like as, if you do it on a lake or like somewhere controlled and do it in a sensible kind of way, obviously like do a bit of research before you head out there. and yeah, like learn on a dinghy is a really great way to get some experience. And once you've fully got that down, you can take those skills and translate them to like much bigger boats. Another way that you can do it is you can go on Facebook or like find a crew. There's a load of websites where you can find people who will take you on as crew and teach you everything. But also with this, it's like, it's important that you sort of like vet these people a little bit, because I've had so many stories from my friends who, well, not so many, but like there's been a fair few stories where mainly girls have like gotten on a boat with some like creepy older guy, and he's done something like they can basically, like, some sailors can just totally ruin it. And yeah, there's a lot of older men that are just like yeah, they're just not very cool. So I think I would like try and find a boat with like younger people if possible. So in fact, yeah, I mean, find a crew bay, just have a look on there, but just like don't just jump for like the first boat you see. Like definitely take a little bit of time to like vet each possible boat, because if you're like getting on a boat with someone, you want to be 100% sure that they're a sound person.
Yeah, you got to know who you're bringing on, right? Because you can't just leave midway. Yeah,
and then what else can you do? And then also, like, I mean, I know a load of people that have just bought a boat with no experience and figured it out along the way, and all of the resources that you need online or in writing on like like on the internet, YouTube videos. Obviously for me, like I was really fortunate that my stepdad is a boat builder, so when I was rebuilding the boat, I could ask him for advice, like, like, what do I do about this situation and what do I do about this? But there's always resources and people you can go to for advice, and people are, if you're willing to put the work in. I was really amazed at how lots of people are willing to help out, especially within the sailing community. It's a really friendly community as a whole, and if someone can help you out, they will. And you can buy cheap boats. If you look on Yacht World, I was looking on it the other day and I saw a boat Elixir's size. Obviously it needed a lot of work, but it was going for free.
For free?
Like literally you can get free boats. People get to their 80s and their 90s and they decide that they don't want to sail anymore. And the thing is with boats is you build such a emotional attachment to this thing that when you come to sell it, the most important thing is it goes to the right person. So if you meet someone who's enthusiastic and is willing to put the work in to maintain this thing that you love, then people will sell boats for very cheap. This is what happened with my friend in Bermuda. He saw this boat that he was instantly in love with, and he went to the guy who was selling it and wrote him a letter saying, look, I'm gonna love this boat, I'm gonna restore her and I'm gonna go sailing with her, and this is what I'm gonna do. And the guy chose that over, like another 10, 20 grand or whatever.
Wow. So sometimes a personal letter may soften the price a little bit.
Yeah. And yeah, there's all sorts of websites where you can find boats going for free. And
awesome. Well, let's get into Q&A.
Q&A.
All right, Max, welcome to Q&A. Q&A is just a segment so that people can get to know you a bit better. So first question, hot or cold?
Cold.
Let's go. I love the cold. I live in Canada, right? So beach or mountains?
Oh, definitely beach. For sure. Yeah.
Bus or train?
Train, I think. Do you want me to expand on these, or a one word?
Oh, you can expand it if you want.
Yeah, I definitely prefer trains than buses. They're just more chill for some reason. I don't know why, but they just are.
They also like don't move as much, right? So if you're like, I mean, in Europe they don't move as much. In Canada, man, our trains, not the same situation. It's
really?
I think I'd take a bus in North America, but I'd take a train in Europe, 100%.
Really?
Yeah. Cats or dogs?
Dogs, definitely. I'm allergic to cats.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Top or bottom bunk?
Um, do you know what I like? I didn't stay in a hostel until really recently because I was always staying on the boat. And when we were in Colombia, it was like the first time I stayed in a hostel because we decided to go off inland. Top.
Nice. So how was your first experience? Was it good or not?
In a hostel?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. It was, yeah, it was really good. We stayed at on Costeño Beach, which is on the northern Caribbean coast of Colombia, and it was so cool. It was so cool. Yeah, met some really cool people. That's what I like about it, is like sailing. You're in these beautiful anchorages, and you do meet other sailors, but obviously there's less people around. Whereas when you're staying in a hostel, it's just like such a cool atmosphere, loads of people from all over the world. You meet some really interesting travelers, and yeah,
there's just so many advantages, in my opinion, to hostels. You know, you get the most latest information you can, right? You can read in your guidebook and it'll be like published 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Or instead you can just go to the person that was there yesterday and ask them like, hey, how should I do this? Or should I go there? Right?
Yeah.
What is your favorite sports team?
Don't know. I don't know about that one. Probably the England. No, I reckon it's the England football team.
Fair enough. You excited for World Cup?
I will be when it starts. I'm not like a massive fan, but when it's on, I'm into it.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Nice. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
A superpower. I say that's a bit of a funny one, but I would really like to breathe underwater. I think that would be insane. I love being underwater, but it's just you can never spend enough time down there before you have to come up again.
Yeah, Max the Aquaman.
Yeah.
If you could have a beer with one person from history, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, I actually don't drink alcohol, but I'd maybe like a coffee or a tea or something.
Yeah, let's go tea. Tea, yeah.
Let me think about that for a second. I think it would be this guy that I keep on rattling on about, Joshua Slocum, who was the first guy to sail around the world, because I'd love to know about where does that motivation come from? Like, how do you just decide that you're going to do something like that, especially coming from like the 19th century when, you know, it's just like so unthinkable to go out and attempt something like that.
Yeah.
I think that would be really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What's something you never travel without?
I mean, it's probably different for most other travelers, but the most important thing is probably a knife for me, because it's it's like absolutely essential on the boat, and we pretty much use it for everything. Opening coconuts, it's the most used tool on Elixir, and I think it's super important.
Filleting fish probably too, right?
Yeah. Everything. Like we're living off these like pretty uninhabited islands a lot of the time, you know. So we're catching fish, lobsters, coconuts, and a lot of, you know, like making food with your hands, opening up coconuts and cracking open lobsters and stuff, which I love. You know, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a good survival tool.
Yeah, for sure.
What is your favorite world attraction?
when we were in Colombia, we hiked to La Ciudad Perdida, which is an ancient civilization in the jungle, which
Nice.
it's a really interesting story. It was originally inhabited by like 5,000 indigenous people that lived in the Sierra Nevada National Park there in Colombia. And
Nice.
when the Spanish colonizers came, they never made it as far as the city, but they got close, and all the people that lived there knew that they were coming, so they abandoned the city and went up into the mountain, because there's like a mountain there. They went up further up and just left it, and then for like 300 or 400 years it was uninhabited. Obviously, like the indigenous people there still knew about it, but none of the Spanish settlers knew about it until only like 50 years ago. A Colombian farmer just stumbled upon the remains of this big city, and just destroyed the whole place, searching for gold and indigenous treasures, basically. Kept it a secret for a few years, and then for a long time it was inaccessible because of the violence going on between the guerrilla groups and the paramilitaries in that part of the country. And then recently it's been sort of turned into a tourist attraction that you can hire a guide and hike to, which is sad in a lot of ways, because obviously it's this sacred town that was home to thousands of people, which has become a tourist attraction. But also at the same time, it's like it's really fascinating to go there and appreciate this history and learn about how how like the country has come about, and just learning about the rich culture that comes from that part of the world. I think that it's a really cool place, older than Machu Picchu, but I feel like not a lot of people know about it.
No, I actually was in Colombia in June, and we were around that area and didn't have the time to go and do the trek, but I heard about it and I was like, fuck, I'd love to do that.
Oh, it's so cool.
Now we're actually doing in September, or at the end of September, we're going to Machu Picchu. So I guess, maybe not going to the lost city, but we're at least doing one that was found recently.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one, man. Which country has the best cuisine? And you can't say England.
Fish and chips. I'm afraid it does have to, it's got to be a European country.
Sure.
I don't know. I do like French and Italian food. But I haven't actually seen that much of the world, because I've been Europe, obviously, Caribbean, South America, and Central America, and I feel like from what I've seen, I definitely personally prefer the food in Europe a lot more, especially like France and Italy.
Two staples though.
I haven't seen enough really to have a good enough answer to that question.
What is the most underrated country that you've been to?
Underrated.
Yeah. One that maybe people don't have on their radar.
I don't want to say it because then everyone will go there. No, I have you heard about the Azores, the islands, the Portuguese islands in the middle of the Atlantic?
Yeah.
They're amazing. Just incredible. And maybe because they're so remote, no one really goes there because they're out there in the middle of the ocean. But in terms of nature, it's subtropical. It's a subtropical climate, and it's just so beautiful. And the people there are really cool and friendly, and it's just this oasis of beautiful greenery in the middle of the Atlantic, and that was a really special place for me.
Is that the place that had recently a volcano erupt?
That's the Canary Islands.
Okay, it's Canary.
They're Spanish. They're a bit different.
Nice
location. They're down towards Africa.
Yeah. I knew there was a Portuguese island somewhere that, or Canary or Spain islands, right?
They're Spanish, the Canaries.
Spanish. Yeah. Where's somewhere you'd never go back?
Probably to Curacao, which is
really,
it's a Dutch island in the Caribbean, because sometimes when you're on a boat, life can just be hard. If for example in Curacao, where you anchor the boat, it's really far away from anything. So to get even food or water from a shop, you need to walk through like the really hot, it's like a desert island. So you're just walking along, you either pay for a really expensive taxi or walk a long way in the heat. And it's just not, I felt like it wasn't set up that well for being on a sailing boat, and life, it can be quite hard sometimes. So I probably wouldn't go back there.
Nice.
Which, I mean, it's, yeah.
Where did you experience the least friendly locals?
Least friendly?
Yeah.
Probably in the UK, to be honest. Well, generally locals are really friendly. The only time when they can be unfriendly is when you're surfing. I find like there's a lot of localism around surfing, which can be quite like hostile and unfriendly, and yeah. So like whilst we've been surfing in the water, a lot in the Canary Islands, a little bit in Panama as well, Portugal. Yeah, all these places have groups of surfers that just do not want foreigners coming and surfing their waves, which is kind of fair enough. But also I think that it's a little bit hypocritical, because then you're kind of saying that you can't ever go and surf anywhere else. And also, like, I just feel like the ocean should be shared by everyone anyway. So, but yeah, you do get a lot of overly aggressive surfers in these places.
Yeah, it is an unfortunate reality with surf communities. Sometimes there's especially if it's like really crowded, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And listen, I gotta mention or address, you know, you talking, saying least friendly locals was in UK. I had a great time. Mm-hmm. People were super nice. I went to Bognor Regis.
To where?
Bognor Regis, near Portsmouth.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Did you see any
shout
fossils?
Out to the, what's that?
Did you see any fossils?
No.
There's a lot of fossils on that region. Yeah, the Jurassic Coast.
No, one of my buddies brought me over there because he was from there, and we literally just went like to the bars there. So shout out to the boys out there, because I know they're listening.
Oh yeah, nice.
All right, so now we can get into top 5.
Top 5.
Okay. So I've just written a list of what I think my top 5 favorite, I guess, tropical destinations that we've sailed to, but from, you know, this trip so far that we've been on, from the UK down to Mexico.
Sure.
The Pacific coast of Mexico.
Sounds good. So just start at number 5 and at number 1.
So number 5, I've got Oaxaca in Mexico, which I love because there's some really interesting culture in Oaxaca City, and then on the coast you have some great surfing. There's a load of amazing right-hand point breaks that go all down that coastline, and Mexicans are just the coolest. And then number 4, I have the Grenadines, which are part of St. Vincent, and these are really special islands because there's a high concentration of small islands which are great for sailing. They're part of the same country, so you can hop between islands freely without having to deal with customs. And
are customs usually a big problem when you're going to different places?
Only because, you know, if you arrive in a new country, you have to deal with customs yourself. It's not like an airport where it's just at the airport and you do it as you come off the plane. You have to come ashore, go to the customs office and take all your paperwork, and then they sort it, and then you go back to the boat. So yeah, it is an added bit of stress for sure. And then so number 4, the Grenadines. Number 3, I've got the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, which is really cool because when we were anchored there was so much biodiversity and wildlife. Pretty much every time we came ashore, we'd see some sort of new animal or creature that we had never seen before, and it's just really interesting to be walking back to the boat at night and see all these things that you had no idea existed. It's just a really cool place.
And what I've heard too from Costa Rica is that the Caribbean coast is a little less commercialized. So it's cool that you got to see that side, because apparently the Pacific side, there's a lot more, hotels, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's,
Well, this is on the Pacific side.
Oh, it was on the Pacific side. Okay.
It's very far south though, so we went to the Caribbean side.
Okay.
But on the Pacific side, it's south near the border with Panama, there's almost nothing. Then as you get further and further north, it gets more and more developed.
So you crossed the Panama Canal? Is that how you went around?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice. What was that like?
Really interesting. Yeah, it's like so how do I describe it? So yeah, it's just this big process. It takes a whole day, and you come in at, like, we came in at 6 p.m. and spent the night sleeping in the canal, and then spent all of the next day like motoring through the canal with these big cargo vessels coming past us, and you take on a pilot. This Panamanian comes and instructs you to go through all the locks, because it's not at sea level, it's 18 meters above sea level, so you have to go up in locks, which are big concrete basins that fill up with water, and then the majority of the canal is above sea level, and you're motoring your way through the jungle. It's really interesting. And then you come back down again in the Pacific. It's a really cool experience, and learning about the history of the canal I found really interesting as well. Yeah, and then you just arrive. It was my first time in the Pacific, and it was really cool to just arrive with Elixir and start sailing north.
Nice.
Yeah, and then number 2, I've got Bocas del Toro in Panama, because it's a really cool place to have a boat, because there's so many little islands. There's some great waves there, and again, some really, really friendly locals. And then number 1, I've got the Caribbean coast of Colombia, because not a lot of sailors are going there, and there's some really, really special places that you can go where it's like really remote and like beautiful scenery and jungle, and it's really special. And also Colombian people are just, I think, some of the friendliest people I've met.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you go like on the coast, like the Tirona region?
Yeah, so we were anchored in a lot of those bays in the Tirona National Park.
Okay, nice.
They're really cool. And you can go even further up. You can go all the way up to Cabo de la Vela, which is like the most northern part of South America. It's kind of like a desert there, but there's a little peninsula that hooks around, and you can anchor up there. It's cool.
Yeah, Colombia is awesome, man. I literally don't think I've done an episode that we haven't talked about Colombia yet.
Really? Yeah, I loved it as well. Yeah.
Story time.
Carrying on a bit from my story earlier, when I was 20, I left the UK on Flying Cloud, this little wooden boat that I bought for £500, and made it all the way down to the Cape Verde Islands in Africa. I was by myself at that point, and then left to sail across the Atlantic by myself, which was, it's quite a big deal, because I was young and like kind of naive, but
there's a lot worse things you could be doing at 21.
Yeah, I just felt like I could do it, and I really wanted to do it. So I left. I spent pretty much all of my money on 3 weeks worth of food, and then left on the crossing. And it was amazing. I spent all this time by myself, and I really enjoyed the solitude. I really enjoyed just the simplicity of spending weeks and weeks sailing, and I was reading loads of books and catching fish, and yeah, I was loving it. But 2 days before I reached the Caribbean, I had an accident with my paraffin stove. So I cooked on paraffin, which is this ancient, archaic way of cooking. Basically, it's this metal stove, and it's got these brass tanks full of paraffin, and then a little cup that you fill full of alcohol, and you burn the alcohol off, and it heats up the hob, and then you pump in the paraffin, and it atomizes, and it burns in this really hot jet. So that was how I was cooking at the time. And the stove wasn't gimbaled, which means it didn't rock as the boat rocked. So as Flying Cloud was moving, the stove was moving as well. And
oh shit.
Yeah, the boat was rocking so much that I had to pour in a little bit of the alcohol, light it, burn it off, and pour in a little bit more. And basically it ended up with about half a litre of this methylated spirit alcohol exploding in my hand. I was half naked. The whole inside of the boat just is on fire. It was really painful. It was like just straight away this really excruciating pain. And yeah, I went into this adrenaline sort of state. I didn't really think, but I ran outside and jumped into the sea, which is like a great idea, but also a terrible idea at the same time because it put the fire out. But if I let go, then the boat would have just sailed away and I would have been floating.
So you were engulfed in flames when you jumped off your boat. Like what parts are you were on fire?
Well, I was wearing trackies, right? So I was like, my top half was naked.
Yeah.
So I was just all on flames, like the whole top bit of me.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah, but I held on with one hand, luckily, because if I didn't, then I would have just been left there swimming around in the middle of the ocean. There's no way you could survive that. And then I climbed back on the boat. Everything's blistering up already. Like I have these big blisters forming all over my shoulders, on my chest. Like a lot of skin showing, like it's all being burnt off. My face is all fucked up as well.
Holy shit. And
then,
at this point, where are you at on your journey? Like, are you almost there or are you halfway?
I was very nearly there. I was still 2 days away, but like,
holy man.
Yeah, and the inside of the boat was on fire, so I threw a bucket of seawater inside the boat to put the fire out, and then I just like treated my burns because I know about first aid, so I know how to deal with the situation, and then sailed for like 2 days pretty much to get
were your hands also burned?
A little bit, like on the tops of my hands, yeah, but I could still use them.
Okay,
and,
good, yeah.
Yeah, and my body was like in shock. I was hallucinating, getting really, really cold.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it was crazy. But
like, what do you mean you were hallucinating? Like, what were you seeing? Like,
I wasn't like having, I wasn't like tripping. I was just didn't really have much of a grasp of reality at times.
Wow. And
all of my senses were just all over the place. Yeah, it was just a fucking nightmare basically. It was close. It was like I was really on the edge, but I always knew that I would make it. And then when I did arrive after 2 days, I pumped up my dinghy and then went to hospital for a week and spent most of the time on a drip. Everything was like bandaged up. It was really bad.
Holy man, that's insane.
Yeah. And then, I had 2nd degree burns over like 10 to 12% of my body. So if you imagine like 1% of your body is your hand, right? I had 10 to 12 hands where my skin had been burnt off completely. And to like recover from that, you can't be out in the sun, like you can't be in the sunshine. So I was like, right, I'm gonna have to spend a year without being in the sun, which obviously means I can't go sailing.
Yeah.
So I left Flying Cloud in the Caribbean and went back to the UK for a whole year. And it was like a whole year of recovery because there was the physical side of thing, like healing the burns, but there was also like the mental side of things. And first of all, I was trying to deal with this intense physical trauma. And then I was also trying to deal with the fact that everyone was talking about it. Like it was in newspapers and I couldn't speak to anyone that, like if there was someone that I hadn't seen for a bit, I couldn't talk to them without them saying something like commenting on the incident.
Bringing it back.
And yeah, if you're trying to deal with trauma, the worst thing, I felt like the worst thing that people can do is use that trauma to identify you. So,
Yeah.
and that was essentially what was happening. All of these people was, sometimes people even make jokes about it. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, make sure you get a better cooker next time," you know, and like, and I was trying to process everything that happened. I felt like I'd failed because obviously the trip had taken this crazy turn.
Yeah.
And then there were people like commenting on it all the time, joking about it. Like I knew everyone was talking about it, and it's like I was still trying to process this. I still couldn't even understand how I wasn't dead. And the last thing I wanted was everyone like talking about it, bringing it up all the time. So overcoming that was a big part of it. But I did, you know, it took me about 8 months, and there were times when it was like really, really dark. Like I like genuinely struggled with like crippling anxiety and depression for a long period of time. But I came out of the other side, and I learned so much from that whole experience. I learned it taught me a lot about not letting other people's opinions or affect my ego, or just not letting other people's comments get to you, because I had to find out a way to deal with it in order to get over the situation. And thankfully, like I have like some scars on my body, but nothing really that bad. And yeah, it was all good in the end. And I went back out to the Caribbean. I'd like rescued Flying Cloud, and then sailed back to the UK. And it was if that trip didn't have the, you know, those highs and lows,
Yeah.
then, or like the adversity that I had to overcome, then I feel there's no way that I would have emerged like as strong and resilient as I feel like I am now, because it was such a big hurdle to overcome, you know. And that's the same with any adversity that anyone has when they're traveling, I think.
Yeah, man. Listen, that's crazy. Like I feel like I felt a bit of what you went through, you explaining that. Like that was, yeah, that's crazy, man. Like,
yeah, it is a crazy story.
Yeah. I mean, when's the book coming out?
There is a book coming out.
There is?
At some point. At some point there will be a book coming out, yeah.
Yeah, man, because that's crazy. Like I think of, like, I guess I've been in other types of situations that you sort of like you, that, you know, kind of one step the wrong way, you know, you don't hold on to your boat, like you're kind of done for. Like it's just your reaction, your will to survive somehow kicks in, right? And you just like in your situation, you had no choice but to just endure, and you did it, man. So like, congrats. Like that's, wow. It's just such an inspiring story.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, man. So listen, thank you so much for coming on.
It's been good to chat. Thank you.
Yeah, man. What a story. Last question for you, I guess, Max, is what's next?
So the Pacific is next. We're going to sail across the Pacific this winter and leave Mexico in February, March time, and then go to French Polynesia and Fiji, a few other islands, and eventually arrive in New Zealand. So that's the next part of the journey. Nice.
I always say last question, and then the guest always says something super cool. So then I'm like, I want to know more about it. How does preparing for the Atlantic Ocean differ to preparing for the Pacific Ocean?
Well, the main difference is obviously the Pacific is a lot more remote. So instead of 2,500 miles, it's more like 5,000 miles.
Oh wow!
So, and you want to spend as much time as possible on the islands in between, some of which don't have much access to water. It's much more of a commodity, and so basically the boat wants to be set up for being remote and off grid for a long period of time. So I'm actually in the process of buying a water maker which makes fresh water from salt water, and
nice.
uses the power from the solar panels on the boat. So the solar, which is charging the batteries, which are then generating fresh water from the salt water. So you don't have to worry about like filling up with water all the time, filling your jugs up and stuff, which is a big part of it. Other than that, like the weather they call it the Pacific because it's much more benign than the Atlantic. The Atlantic's actually quite windy. Yeah. I think there's not many huge differences. You just have to prepare for living off grid for a longer period of time.
Nice. And sorry, did you say, are you planning to do that solo, or are you doing with some friends?
No. I'm taking a few friends with me.
Awesome.
On that one.
Well, listen, I look forward to seeing the updates on your Insta and your social.
Thank you.
Your TikTok.
Thank you.
And just to remind people, it's un.tide, so UNTIDE
un.tide.
Un.tide, right?
Yeah. And I have a YouTube channel as well, which I've sort of just started that, but it's going pretty well.
Yeah, definitely check out his content. Great stuff. If you want to get into sailing, if you want to see what around the world looks like, basically. Anyways, thanks so much for coming on, Max. Opening up, inspiring the people. And
thank you.
Best of luck on your travels and your. Hopefully, you can safe sails.
Cheers. Cheers. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Two Beers Till Takeoff. Do you want free additional content or just to stay connected with the show? Then give us a follow on our social media platform. That means TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of them. Are you in need of podcast production services, video editing, or anything in between? Then look no further than Strut Sound Productions, the official producer of the Two Beers Till Takeoff podcast. Music produced by Alex Gagné. Check out his work in our show notes. Voiceover done by Viking Leo K. See you next week on Two Beers Till Takeoff.